Charlotte, these numbers don't look so good for Renault. Tell us more.
And that was a surprise because Renault, as you remember, was one of the European car makers that had been doing best last year. The only one that didn't issue a profit warning with Ferrari last year. And yet we still things catching up with them. They mentioned weak demand in Europe. The June volumes lower than expected, they say, in the van market in particular. So they have revised their guidance because of that. They see full year operating margin at 6.5% instead of 7% previously, and free cash flow between 1 and 1.5 billion euros versus 2 previously. They also said they will step up their cost-cutting plan going forward. As you were saying, they are in a difficult moment because yesterday was actually the day that Luca De Meo, the CEO since 2020, is leaving to go to Kering, so he will be facing his own problems there with the turnaround there. But certainly the new CEO for Renault, they said the search is already well underway. In the meantime, CFO Duncan Minto will be interim CEO, and the challenges for the new CEO, of course, will be, well, all the headwinds that we see in the autos industry at the moment, the question of tariffs, the question of the Chinese EV makers competition, so they will have to deal with that. For Renault, there's also the question of the Nissan alliance, how this will play going forward, but we see that the stock is down 17% over the past 12 months, so similar to Mercedes. Better than Stellantis, they have their own issue with the US. Renault doesn't have that exposure, but suddenly we see that the slowdown in Europe is starting to bite, even with some of the players that have been performing best last year.
And Renault has made some major progress on its EV offering. Any color on how they're doing right now relative to peers?
And so that was interesting. You remember that they were thinking of doing an IPO and doing a spin-off with Ampere. Decided not to do that. They have enough investment in that unit. But certainly that will be one of the issues that they have to address. The new CEO will have to look at, how they take this unit forward. You remember that the ethos under Luca De Meo was moving away from volume and move towards margins. And EVs kind of was squeezing the margins a little bit. So the move towards EV is one that is challenging for a lot of the car makers, as we know and we've seen in the previous year.
Spin-off. If this is the future, what are you going to be left with? What's the rump worth if you sell off the future?
Yeah. And at the same time, the market was quite happy with that, saying that it was put away, was taking a bit of uncertainty out of the way, said they could make the investments on their own without having to spin off. So they were keeping a bit of control on that unit going forward.
I mean, if you're selling cars and you want to sell off the future, which is the bit that we're going to sell off with Ampere, which is EV, why would you want to be left with the rump that you don't think is the future and that the regulations ultimately say you've got to stop selling?
Well, so it depends on the market. I actually see the ICE cars still having a lot of future in the market.
But